Solomon Atela is our guest this hour, and Solomon is the Assistant Director, Education and Public Awareness at the EACC, that is the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Solomon, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's Biggest Conversation.
Thank you, it's a privilege.
You're in the hot seat of the Situation Room this morning, and we are coming round to the conversation around the fight against corruption, right? And it's been a fight for a while. It's been a fight for a very long time. And we've been asking ourselves, are we making any strides? Are we looking at a situation whereby the corruption situation in the country is getting any better? Is it getting any worse? And as we come towards commemorating World Anti-Corruption Day, that conversation or that question has to be asked for Kenya. But before we get into that, let's welcome you properly into, proper Situation Room fashion. CT goes around Africa. He collects proverbs. This week, we're into the Lusophone country of Mozambique. So he's going to tell you what the proverb is. Tell us what you think about it and how you would interpret it. Is that all right? Okay.
Privilege.
We're in the People's Republic of Mozambique. By persevering, the egg walks on legs. By persevering, the egg walks on legs.
What do you think?
By persevering, the egg walks on legs.
Yes.
What has come to my mind is the process of birthing and the process of bringing forth something that you don't see. So I'm thinking that the Proverbs basically allows you to understand before the egg walks on legs, there's a process. That process may be not one of the best, but finally the end product of something live that you can touch, you can feel, you can see, you can relate to is what is walking on the legs. That's what I feel. Every good thing has a process. Every good achievement has a process. So is the egg has to persevere to bring forth whatever walks on the legs.
Voila.
Very good. Indeed. Excellent interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've come to another December, Solomon, and we are commemorating World Anti-Corruption Day.
Sure.
And we have to ask that question. And we're going to go in depth into it. But many have said the bane of Kenya's existence, the bane of the existence of many nations has been corruption. And if you can get rid of corruption, then you're going to steer a nation into some kind of positive trajectory. So where is Kenya today in the fight against corruption? Better? Worse? What's the scorecard?
Well, quite a mixture of thoughts and opinions, but I will first take from where we stand as a public agency, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, where we're making good progress. However, that progress, whether it's in terms of the cases that we're investigating, the cases of deterrence, but that I mean where we've been able to stop a potential loss of public funds or assets, we've made extreme progress in certain areas. When we talk about reaching out to the youth, in terms of their role in the anti-corruption agenda, preparing for the future, we've made extreme progress in conjunction, in partnership with many stakeholders, state and non-state actors. But I think where there is, and I'll use this with a lot of caution, there's a public feeling that in terms of the investigation, the punishment of those that have been found culpable or perceived to be culpable, that process seems to be below expectation. So I would say that the progress is tremendous. It's slow, and sometimes to the pain and the disappointment of many Kenyans. But we must keep the fight. We are on a right trajectory. We need to push on, pile the pressure, knowing where we want to go.
What are some of the markers of this tremendous progress that you speak of? What would we be able to see and say, all right, because of 1, 2, 3, we can say, yes, tremendous progress is being made in the fight against corruption?
Two issues come to mind. One is our involvement, and I think rarely do Kenyans hear this a lot, with institutions of learning. As you're talking, I'll give you a situation of one of the high schools in Coast that had serious issues of indiscipline, under-enrollment. But the commission, working together with some of the teachers that believed in promoting ethics among the youth, over time were able to work and turn around that school. Is one of the schools that every parent within Mombasa region would want their kids to go to. Mm-hmm. In terms of the levels of discipline have tremendously increased. I'm talking about a school that never had students or pupils beyond 100. Now have pupils beyond 1,000. So some of the markers are not things that people can say you prosecuted 20 cases and this number of cases were made. That is important. So for me, in terms of just getting to win over the hearts of the young, we've made tremendous progress with teachers, with the Ministry of Education, with the Teacher Service Commission, and we continue to do that. One of the things that we also say is in terms of our success rates, the cases of under investigation, we'd say over 80%. Together through the ODPP, we're making progress. Of course, we've had a lot of issues of assets recovered. And whenever assets are recovered from people that acquired them illegally, especially public assets for us, is quite a big achievement, because if that is not done, then we're saying anybody can wake up in the morning and pick up a public asset and they are not accountable to anybody. Beyond assets being recovered, we've also been able to deter. Through our intelligence, we're able to get information that a particular government office, public office is about to lose certain funds, amount of funds. Then you're able to move in and just deter and prevent potential public loss. So those are some of the issues that get to mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
For corruption, when we talk about this, a lot of times it is misuse, mismanagement, misappropriation of public funds.
Yes.
We can give it all kinds of fancy names, but at the end of the day, it is stealing.
Yeah.
Right? And the punishment for that would then resonate in the minds of people for them to see that the needle is moving, is if these individuals are charged to court, a trial takes place, they are found guilty, and then they are sentenced. What we have seen, especially this year, is the dropping of tens of cases for something called lack of evidence. We have seen people have assets recovered. So somebody says, I nicked this thing, or rather I nicked this money and I've been able to buy this thing. But what's going to happen is that the state is just going to take the thing away from me. Don't suffer any jail time. Don't maybe pay a fine. A slap on the wrist is actually what it looks like. But it is never played vis-a-vis the suffering that is caused by the fact that those public funds have been stolen. When that happens, in my opinion, is what will set a proper deterrent. This other business of asset recovery and plea bargaining and dropping cases for lack of evidence is a slap on the wrist. Only then, in my opinion, will the needle move. But the question is, how bold then are we willing to be to move the needle?
I think we must be able to be bold enough, not just as government agencies, but also as our Kenyan people. Reason being, there is a misplaced conception that once you've given a public agency like EACC a mandate to do a job, then the rest of us should sit and go and sleep. If we were to move that needle, you're talking about, then there has to be a collective responsibility and accountability. I hear you. The cases of hearing cases have been dropped because of lack of evidence is painful. Yeah, when you hear, for instance, Mr. Atela here was accused of stealing 10 billion, and because of plea bargaining, he's been able to return, say, 8 billion. What happened with the 2 billion? That is frustrating. However, one thing that I think we must accept is we have what I would call a justice process, yeah, which has many players, and EACC is one of them. If the commission investigated cases and took them over to DPP, and then the same goes to the judiciary, we all love the aspect of the principle of independence. So let every arm work independently for the good of all of us. So we've always maintained, and we still do as a commission, that we do the best in terms of investigating our cases, presenting evidence that we think is enough to the ODPP, who then take the same to our judiciary. In the process, if there is a withdrawal, I think it's just important that we all relook at that process, look at each case on its own merit. But we do believe that we need to work harder as a country, as various government agencies, to ensure that whenever a case is presented to court, then that is sustainable. And the results are not just for window dressing, but they are there for the public good. One thing that I think we also need to appreciate is the law does provide for alternative dispute resolutions. For many, just realize that an average corruption case would always take 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
And that is costly not only to the commission but to us as a country, and especially if that case or such a case involves extraterritorial jurisdictions, where you need to bring evidence, collect evidence, bring witnesses from other jurisdictions. That process is very expensive. And that is why the commission has also felt where there is sufficient and objective reason to allow accused persons to get into plea bargaining, use alternative dispute resolution mechanisms is easier.
Why? I'm sorry, I have to interject there. Why?
Why? Because we are looking at if I'll give you a case in Mombasa again, where a guy had acquired a public land within one of the prime areas. He came to the commission and said, fine, instead of having to pull me through the whole legal process, I accept. I'm willing to return this piece of land. And for sure they did. So what happens is such kind of situations are recorded before the court and agreements are made. By the way, it will save us as a country and as a nation the cost of incurring investigations, which will be long, the cost of judicial process. While that is important, I accept. We also must be able to know how then do we ensure that the public does not bear unnecessary loss and the culprits are also not punished. That again is something that we have to deal with within our judicial process, our laws, to ensure that our mechanisms are foolproof. But in a nutshell, the commission is given the opportunity through the legal mechanisms to allow accused or perceived fair persons to be able to plea bargain.
It sounds easy. And for me, if we're talking about set precedent, then anybody would know that because EACC, for example, has been allowed to go the plea bargaining way, or to say just return whatever it is that you took, the likelihood of somebody getting involved in something like this then just goes higher. Does it not?
Why?
Because I know that at the end of the day, you'll just tell me to return the thing. And I may have benefited from it at some point. You'll tell me to return the thing. I return the thing. You say, don't do that again. And then we go off and we continue.
I hear you. When you're returning, does not mean that if I stole 2 million, I'm only returning 2 million. That would be costs. If there were interest involved, you'd pay for those interests. If there were any cost involved. So I think the public should also, when we do that, it's not just an easier, convenient option. We also make sure that you return, if it is cash, in addition to accrued costs. So there's a penalty. to that.
And have you found that this is an easier way to go about this than being strung up in court for the 5 to 10 years that you talk about, hoping and crossing fingers, knocking on wood that a judge would find an accused person guilty, and then, which is then in terms of recovery of process, which is easier for you from what you see?
I would say which one is easier, because I would give it a case-by-case situation. There are cases then, because of public interest, then you don't want to go through that route. But in terms of the speed, in terms of resolving some of these issues, in terms of, if you talk about physical assets, I think is less costlier to have a person say, for sure, I acquired this house, this car illegally. I'm willing not only to return it, but also to bear the costs. Yeah, but I think it should not be a blanket issue. We should be able to look at it, and the Commission does a lot, case by case basis. Yeah.
Okay. It seems as though, again, this conversation will come in, and even, people that we've spoken to over time, that it comes in terms of the big fish. The big fish never really do, pay for what they've done. But for some reason, those who are on the bottom rung will always suffer more than those who maybe have taken much more, or those who are in a position to kind of sway things in their favor. How would you look at that?
I love ladies. Well, lovely question, too. But I sometimes ask myself the question: who is the big fish? In our understanding of a Kenyan, who is the big fish?
It depends. If I happen to be someone whose work involves what we call mjengo, big fish for me would be the person who is the owner of that particular construction site that I'm on. That would be the big fish. The owner of that construction site would probably look at the construction authority as the big fish.
Yeah.
The person in the construction authority would look at the person in the ministry under which they fall as the big fish. The person who is in that ministry would look at the CS. The CS would look at the president. So big fish depends on who it is you see and the position you are in as an authority figure.
Right.
Yes. Now, when we talk about politicians collectively, they are all considered to be big fish because the decisions they make on our behalf affect our lives very, very directly.
True.
And in more ways than one. But again, I sometimes think, this is my thought, that because we don't have adequate information as to how, for instance, the EACC conducts their investigations, meaning the processes that they follow.
Yes.
Because I remember the time when there was a back and forth between the head of ethics and anti-corruption, as there was a problem with the DCI boss, there was a problem with
ODPP.
Yeah, ODPP. And the problem was, it all revolves around investigation. Okay? Now, it starts with, who do we have in the ethics and anti-corruptions? What sort of individuals and what training do they have? So that when we say that they're investigating, we understand that these are people who are fit for the task. And what processes do they follow? So that when one understands, one realizes, wait a moment, if someone is saying this due diligence wasn't done, the probably it's them who don't know what they're talking about. Because indeed due diligence was done, but we can't make that decision if we don't know some of these things. So my question is, who are the people who do the investigations? What is their training? What is their background? 2, what processes do you follow when you are undertaking an investigation? Before you arrive and say, this is where we are.
I'll attempt. I'm not an investigator, but I'll be able to give you, in a nutshell, what happens. But before I do that, allow me just to say something that your observation may be very right. 2 days ago, the UNODC had a dialogue for Kenyan youth in Gigiri. And during that dialogue, the younger people that were in the dialogue asked me a question. What is so difficult that if a person is being reported to have stolen, why can't you just as a commission, why do you waste time, go through the court process, investigation? Take this guy, go and lock him in or her in committee. And you'll see the anger and the frustration in their faces, which is right. One of the things that I think we ensure and we try to do is to follow due process. And that due process means whatever the commission does has to be done within the confines, the boundaries, or the given laws of the land. Our investigations I'll tell you, are very competent. A number of them don't come into the commission as freshers. Most of them come in. Okay. You don't agree?
No, please go ahead.
Okay. A number of them are people with good training, and the commission also invests in training our investigators, whether they are people doing basic investigations on finance or forensic investigators, analysts. So a basic corruption file goes through many processes. And just to take back a bit is we get reports, whether through our own intelligence, either through somewhat the fourth estate covers, either through our own initiatives. We also look at reports from the Auditor General, and where we feel there is public interest and there's reason to move in, we make that decision to move in. So I would assure you, our investigations most of the time are thorough, done by competent people. But then people got to appreciate our justice process, and that is what we gave ourselves as a Kenyan people. That EACC does investigations on corruption cases. Then the person that undertakes the prosecution is the Office of the Deputy Public Prosecution, who then takes the matters to court. The only time that we are able to take our own cases to court when we are doing civil recoveries. Then that's the commission has the opportunity to present his case to the court directly. But in all these other cases, we are mandated, obligated to go through the DPP.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you have all the evidence stacked and everything that you need when it comes to this fight, why does it seem then as if the strides are shorter and covering a shorter distance?
Why the strides are shorter and covering a shorter distance? I don't know what informs your observation, why you think the strides are shorter and covering a shorter distance. Just allow me to reiterate that because of where we're coming from and the frustrations, which are rightly so, that the Kenyan people and all of us go through, we got to a point where we are looking for solutions and you want them quickly. Unfortunately, the reality of the matter is sometimes the quick solutions that we want may not come as quick as we want. But I want to believe if we all put our hands on the deck and we give it our best, private and public citizens, we can be able to move with speed and cover higher ground. And that is why for me, the aspect of bringing on board many stakeholders, especially the youth. Remember, when you introduced this, then we are in this season of commemorating the International Anti-Corruption Day. And the theme of this commemoration is uniting with the youth against corruption, shaping the future with integrity. We are all still alive to the June happenings. And if we wanted to cover a longer stride, much ground, then each one of us and all of us got to find their space and objectively work together to do what it takes to overcome corruption challenges. Yeah. So I leave it in terms of the success of the commission. I think we're not here to say we've achieved this much. We'll just tell you where we've made success, where we need to improve. But the Kenyan population and each one of us has a right to make an observation on what they think we have achieved so far.
There is a saying that people like talking about or even replicating in Kenya that corruption or big corruption fights back. Because if I look at some of the successes that have been in the public domain,
Yes.
it is clear that in the absence of the ethics and anti-corruption, those successes would not have been seen. They would not have been achieved. So they are successes. However, the problem that we have, sorry, it's not we. The problem that I have whenever I look at the ethics and anti-corruption is I can't look at them in isolation. I can't isolate them from the ODPP, from the DCI, and from the judiciary. I can't.
Why, sir?
Because they more or less all seem to be they're supposed to be doing more or less the same thing. It's just that some look at different facets of the same thing, but they all seem to be doing the same thing. What do I mean by that? You see, if you have an anti-corruption agency, because that's what we're being told, that's what it's called, it's an anti-corruption agency. Corruption is a crime.
Right.
When it is proven. DCI investigate these things as well. Okay? And they eventually end up in court. Now, I started off by saying that we like saying that corruption fights back. Are we saying that whenever investigations are started, when you know that there's an issue that is being looked into, but you want to ensure that it's fit to be taken to court or it's fit for prosecution, is it that that process is interfered with so much by those who might not benefit from a certain outcome? Or is it that the organization is hampered because of resources? This one we hear very, very often. Resources. Or is it that sometimes the issues that come to you just don't have legs? I mean, they've come to you and you're investigating and you realize there's nothing really, there isn't anything here that is adequate to be taken to the next level.
Thank you. It's true that corruption fights back, and I think it's a common reaction, especially when you're dealing with criminal situations, high value cases, high net worth people. They'll fight back. I think that's not just a Kenyan scenario; it's a global scenario, and all of us are privy to the cases of drug trafficking. And globally and even nationally, whenever you make a step to nab these persons, they would also fight back. So we one thing that I think is also true, that corruption is a systemic problem. Yeah, and then sometimes systemic issues should be dealt with holistically, consistently, and that there is no one silver bullet that will deal with this. I always make this observation that the first maize scandal in Kenya was in the year 1966.
Yes.
And still to date, every Kenyan administration, political system has had something around maize.
So if you connect the dots...
It's a commodity in great demand.
And that tells you, I think, we must, and this is for me from a governance perspective, we must be able to deal with corruption issues not from just an investigation perspective. That is important. We see a lot of investigations because it's what catches the limelight. But we also must be able to deal with the systemic issues that necessitate those issues. Yeah, assuming you are appointed as CEO of a government agency, what hinders you, or what makes you not to appoint your own cronies, people from your village, into office? And if you did that, how will we deal with it? So those issues are real, and people fighting back is real. Of course, one thing that I also must observe is when we have a case being dealt with various groups, then the progress may be slow. So those are some of the areas that I think as a people, in tweaking our legal processes, we may need to think through. Do we need to provide a time frame so that if a case of corruption was presented to DPP and to the court, they need to go through this number of years? Would that help us? Okay.
Is it too overwhelming? Are the cases of corruption, is the idea of corruption in this country too overwhelming to say, okay, you put this one out, another one pops up over here. You put this one out, another one pops up. Is it too overwhelming to say that one body or that everybody should be involved in making sure that, we start to snuff this thing out? Mind you, that there are jurisdictions on this planet, not another life form, human beings on this planet, whereby the idea of corruption is so the idea, not the act, is so frowned upon that people will not touch it with a 10-foot pole. Or that even if there is a whiff of something in their direction that could be corruption and somebody call them out for, they say, no, we are not going in on this planet. So is it such that it has permeated society so much that it would be impossible to get rid of, at least to places where you can say it is manageable?
Right observation, madam, and it's true that there are jurisdictions that just the imagination that you're corrupt is not accepted. And unfortunately, Kenyans have made a lot of benchmarking with such jurisdictions many times. That gets me back to the observation that I made a few minutes ago, that corruption in Kenya and what you're dealing with is a systemic issue. And remember, in 1976, that's the first time the late Shikuku brought in a bill in Parliament on gifts. Discussed. Still to date, we are grappling how do we deal with conflict of interest and handling bulk gift. If you remember during the debate on the impeachment of the former DPP, one of the grounds that he was accused of is he accepted a gift of cows from a region against the law. Why am I saying this? The systemic nature of corruption fueled by political convenience in this nation is alarming. And that has created, has undermined institutions, undermined systems. So I think we must be able to, while we are undertaking progress to deal with those that have been culpable or found guilty, we also must constantly not drop the ball on strengthening our instruments of governance beyond the legal process.
From what you're saying,
Yes.
it looks like we have accepted that corruption is part and parcel of the way we do things in this country.
Yeah.
So that it is not that we want to do with corruption, we want to do with a certain level of corruption.
That's okay.
Yes. There are certain levels which are not too big an issue. The only details that's required of you just don't get caught.
It's like an ulcer.
Yeah,
You're going to keep it at bay. It's going to flare up every now and then.
But there are others that now people feel, no, this is too much.
I must see the doctor.
This one, you can't treat it at a dispensary. You have to actually go and see a specialist. Now, because when we talk about these problems beginning from 2 years after independence, you're talking 1966, it means that the inclination has always been there.
Right.
And if the inclination has been there even within the leadership, then it means that even as we have these laws, you already, put it this way, you are starting from a position of disadvantage. And so which leads to the question I want to ask. Has the ethics and anti-corruption faced situations where people from within its ranks have been a hindrance to these processes?
I don't know whether I get your question right. That is within the commission itself?
Let me ask the question again.
Okay.
People who work for the ethics and anti-corruption, have we had a situation, we as a country, or have we witnessed, or as you who works in who is in management, have you witnessed people who work within the organization? Have you witnessed a situation where they have proven to be a hindrance to the process of actually trying to set right these wrongs?
Not that I'm aware of, but I would tell you, EACC is an agency in this nation, is not from us. And so if there be any issues like that, we have a mechanism of identifying and dealing with them. Yeah.
You know why I asked the question?
Right.
One of the biggest hindrances to any pursuit of justice in this country revolves around, people say corruption. It's not corruption, it's bribery.
Okay.
You see, people are given money to subvert justice.
Sure.
And one can talk strongly about being against bribery because perhaps one hasn't been offered an adequate bribe. But the point being this.
Yes.
If indeed it was found that there are problems of that nature within the ethics and anti-corruption, how would that be dealt with?
Okay. We have, as a commission, we've had cases like that when one or two of us have been found acting inappropriately.
Yes.
And of course, just like any human resource management process would expect it to do, we've taken administrative processes. A number of us have been exited from the commission when such cases have arisen. Yeah. So the commission also has put in place to ensure that staff like myself are also taken into account. And if I'm found wanting in any measure, then there are adequate mechanisms, including being taken to court to answer for that. But if you allow me to just to go back to, does it mean that you've got a point where corruption is like, let's live with it? I've had a lot of that sentiment. Recently, I was talking to student leaders from Pwani University, and one of the students asked us a question. Don't you think some level of corruption is acceptable?
Was that rhetorical or were
No,
you?
it was to our face. Yeah. And you may understand from where they're coming from, because the truth of the matter is, when some of us benefit, let me give it an example. If I'm a young girl or a young man just finished college and I get my uncle sitting here,
Yes.
gave me a job, whether I'm qualified or not, while my peers are still tamacking. 2 months after college, he's gotten me a job, or my auntie here gets me a job. It benefits me. But if I found out that another guy got a job through the same process, I'll be crying on top of Mount Kenya. This country is this blah and blah.
Killing me.
Yeah. So I feel that we must be able to address the issues of corruption in this nation, not just from the legal perspective, but also deal with the systemic, socio-cultural drivers. And allow me to ask you a question.
Please.
There's a report done by the Youth CAF. They were trying to look at the participation of the youth. Those are the guys between 18 to 34 years in the last elections. How many of them vied, how many were elected? And one thing struck my mind, that if you go to the county assemblies, the number of people within that age bracket that were elected as MCAs is a staggering 300. But any of us here that is privy to the happenings in our county governments, if we have such a number, 300 MCAs, does that tell you something about the quality of the people we elected?
How would that come through?
Remember, in terms of legislation and oversight, the county assemblies at the county levels
Yes,
play a very critical role.
indeed.
Now, if the number of young people in those MCAs, which I'm thinking about, these are innovative, creative, robust, people that are able to demand for the right thing. Now, and they're better informed. What is happening that this young generation with that kind of knowledge are not able to constantly and objectively hold the executive at the county level to authority, hold the assemblies? Why is it that 10 years after devolution, you're still grumbling with corruption, serious issues at the county level? Yet, we have a better informed, we have more educated MCS at the county level.
So doesn't it go back to what CT was saying, that, people are comfortable with it? It's like that ulcer that hurts you every now and then, but, you kind of live with it.
You're used to it.
It's you and your parasite-host relationship. That it's going to be there. You might knock it out every now and then, but it's going to come back because you're giving it a conducive environment to continue to thrive. If you had, let me tell you, the mosquito, if you're going to whack the thing, if you're going to use a mosquito net, or if you're going to use some kind of insecticide, the thing will die. But until and unless you're ready to use every single thing that could come against this mosquito, it will continue to buzz in your ear. Right there. Until you whack it out. That's the truth.
But even more importantly, understand that what it is that feeds what we call corruption is impunity.
Right.
So long as people understand that you will get away with it, then people will be inclined to doing wrong because they know they'll get away with it. The only reason why people sometimes are deterred from doing wrong is because they understand the consequences.
Indeed.
True.
But if what is presented continuously is that there will be no consequences, then there is nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
And if everyone, you see, and this is where the power of example comes in.
Yeah.
If people who are in authority are doing this very thing which is wrong, it becomes really difficult to put a lid on it. It becomes really, really difficult to put a lid on it. Because it means that it has been presented as something that is acceptable. Okay? Now, the dire consequences that it brings about to the country, it's not just a subject of discussion, but it explains the very problems that we currently have. Because this country has enough money, in my opinion.
Right.
We collect enough money. We have enough human resources. Everything that we have can actually run this country well. And yet it doesn't.
Solomon?
Right observations. But again, where I think we're not doing rightly is we feel that there are certain bodies that should do this for us.
Yes.
One time VC gave me an example, please. I'm passionate about young people and their involvement. And she was talking to us about a case where a young girl had failed her exams. That's her university exams, and she was supposed to do a retake. And she tried talking over with the HOD who refused. She wanted a way out. Then she went in and brought the mom to talk to the HOD. The HOD refused. So bluntly, before the HOD and the young girl, the mother purported to ask, so tell us what you want. Do you want her or me?
Yeah.
Systemic issues are not dealt with in a quick fix. And that's why, if you allow me, then the case that you could be alluded to, Singapore is one case. When they were there in 1960s, they were worse than us. As you're dealing now with Singapore, the cases of corruption they're dealing with are coming from the private sector more than the public service. What did they do? The confidence levels of the public service of Singapore is over 90%.
Right.
For the general public. So I think there has to be a serious, objective, consistent efforts by both in government, both outside governments, the non-state actors, the young and the old, to be able to put every one of us
In check.
Solomon
Atela, the Assistant Director, Education and Public Awareness, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Thank you for being our guest this hour as we continue to look at the fight against corruption, and it doesn't stop.